In order to make a distilled beverage or a distilled spirit, I have to start with some sort of an alcohol beverage. In other words, I'm distilling or concentrating the alcohol that's already in an alcohol beverage. So I'm going to start with a wine or I'm going to start with a beer. Once I've created that alcohol beverage, I can stick it inside of a still, and as David and Paul will explain, separate, frankly, the alcohol from the water and, make a more concentrated alcohol beverage. And wine's pretty simple to make. You are, I don't know, 10, 20,000 years ago, and you collect some grapes and you eat them. You're a good hunter-gatherer and you're eating everything that you can, but, at some point you get full and there's still grapes left. So cool, you stick them in a container because, you want to eat them tomorrow. And you're not an idiot, so you put a lid on the thing, of course, because you don't want the bugs to get to them, and you kind of squish them in there, and now you've broken the grapes. And now there's grape juice that's available, and the grape juice has sugar in it, and there's yeast everywhere. I mean, they grow everywhere in the air. I got yeast in me right now. There's yeast on our skin, right? So the yeast find the sugar, and they convert the sugar to alcohol, and they also convert it to carbon dioxide gas, and they also convert it to heat. And so after I've shoved those grapes in there and then gone out hunting for, whatever, I come back about 2 days later, 3 days later, and the crushed juice has created an opportunity for yeast to start fermentation. And I come back and I look at this pot with the lid on it, and the lid's starting to go like that, right? Because the heat and the gas is expanding in there, and things kind of jumping around and bubbling. And at some point, those spirits kind of settle down. In other words, the lid stopped popping around, and whoever you were at this point, Orc picks up the pot and drinks, whatever nectar is inside this stuff, and is at least, is transported for at least a few hours.
The whole idea of distillation is really simple. Taking a kettle and boiling that beer or that wine. Now, why are we doing that? Pot still is the oldest form of distillation in the world. Basically, it's just a kettle. It's just boiling. That's all that it is. And as the beer or the wine is boiled in the kettle, then it moves along to these coils, and the coils cool the vapors, and the vapors transform back into liquid. Why were they boiling these beers and wines? Medicine. That's one of the many uses that ancient civilizations used distillation for. Distillation is a purification process. If I could give you any definition of distillation, it would be that. Then in around 700 AD, give or take, in what is now Iraq, a mathematician, a writer, a physician, really a genius, a Leonardo of his day in Iraq, Jabbar, created the first metal pot still. And he used copper. And he used copper for two reasons. One, copper, and if you notice, this David's still is copper. So this is a very old, this isn't Jabbar's still, I might add, but it's basically the same idea. But what Jabbar realized was two things about copper. One, it's malleable, so you could shape it. And two, copper is a fantastic conductor of heat. So the heating of the beer or the wine, whatever Jabbar was using, was much more reliable. It was much more evenly heated. And because it's metal, it was much more durable. Then in 900 AD, another gentleman from what is now Iran, from Persia, Avicenna, wrote extensively about it. And he was a physician, a mathematician. Here's the key to this. These two gentlemen in particular, Jabbar and Avicenna, both from the Middle East, really pushed the whole process of distillation forward dramatically. From 700 AD, 800 AD on, this is how things are distilled. There was an explosion of distilling. So this process stayed the same throughout this entire period, getting a huge boost from Christian monks in the late Middle Ages throughout Western Europe, who from the School of Medicine in Salerno, Italy, which did a tremendous amount of distilling from 1100 AD up to about 1500. Just a tremendous explosion. Thanks primarily to the monks and the abbeys and monasteries. Now, what's interesting about pot still distillation is because this is a small vessel, and because each distillate is a single batch, pot still distillation creates a spirit that has a real identity. Because it's a batch process, you have the situation where it's very labor intensive. So think of this as a 50-gallon still. Every time it's done, it has to be cleaned out. As distilling was growing rapidly in the 1700s, three gentlemen in particular, Jean-Baptiste Blumenthal in France around 1818, and Robert Stein and Aeneas Coffey in Ireland and Scotland, created collectively a new way to distill. The second type of distillation became very popular. That's column still distillation. The difference between pot still distillation and column still distillation is basically that because pot still distillation brings on very small amounts, single batches of very intense, very characterful spirits, column still, continuous distillation, brings about efficient, high volume, lighter spirits. Now, is one better than the other? Well, in my opinion, no. They're just different. And each of these different styles of distillation are absolutely necessary to have a global industry that we have today.